Welcome to 10 Years Out, Stories from My Queer Community. I'm your host, Sam, and it happens to be my 10 years out. My pronouns are she, her, and I identify as queer. Oh, thank God I'm editing this. This is so weird to me to not see myself. I have to I have to turn the video back on. I have forgotten that this is only going to be audio. Okay. Uh I identify as queer. Here with me tonight is one of my best friends in the whole world. Her name is Lisa. Hi, Lisa.
Hello.
Hi. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So, some preliminary introduction questions so the listeners can know a little bit about you. What are your pronouns? How do you identify? And how long have you been out?
My pronouns are she, her. I'm a lesbian, I guess. Queer, lesbian, gay. I don't know. How old was I when I came out? I was
Or how long
38.
have you been out?
Oh, yeah. How long have I been out? About 5 years.
Cool.
I think officially out. Yeah.
Sweet. And what do we need to know about your story before we get into what you've learned since coming out?
Okay. I'm just going to start from the top. I was born. No, I'm not going to start from birth, but I will start from high school. I had my first girlfriend in high school back in the 90s. And I went through the whole thing of admitting to myself, I'm gay. I did that thing where you stand in front of the mirror and you say it, and it's really scary and weird. And I lived in a really conservative area. I grew up in the South. My dad was very, very conservative. That's probably putting it mildly. But in spite of that, I kind of had accepted that this was my life and this was me. But then I met a girl right before college and I fell head over heels, and she told me that we couldn't be together because of God. So I was devastated.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah. But I followed her into that. I prayed that God would make me normal and give me the life that I had always wanted. I'd always wanted a family and kids, and back in the 90s, it felt like really the only way to achieve that was the traditional way.
Mm-hmm.
I went to college. I immediately got involved in a campus ministry. It felt like home, felt like family. Met my future husband there my freshman year. We got married after my junior year, and then after I graduated, we started a campus ministry together. Soon after that, we had 2 kids. We did campus ministry for a while, a few years, and then he pastored 2 churches. So I was a preacher's wife for a long time, trying desperately to fit in and to keep my head above water with anxiety and undiagnosed anxiety disorder and 2 small children, in a really unfulfilling marriage where I felt alone and stuck for a really long time. So then fast forward to 2018, after 17 years of marriage. It sounds ridiculous when I say it out loud. Finally hit my breaking point. Separated from my ex-husband. I quickly entered a relationship with a lifelong friend who was a woman, who would later become my wife. The separation with my ex-husband and divorce were really messy in a lot of ways. I ended up estranged from my kids for a couple of years. And then, meanwhile, I got remarried. I got cancer. I got divorced again. I beat cancer. Um, I reunited with my kids, with whom I now have very strong relationships, thankfully. So that is my backstory. As for coming out, yeah, it's a long backstory. When I began my relationship with my ex-wife, I felt like I kind of had to officially make a statement.
Mm.
She was out. I didn't want it to be this confusing, weird thing, like, are they together, are they not? So I felt like broadly I needed to let people know that I'd known for years, in the context of my church and my ex-husband. I kind of felt like I had to explain where I was now.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like I owed it to my wife to be, like, out and proud. I didn't want her to think I was ashamed of her, or our relationship. So, some people I talked to in person, but I also made a coming out post on social media.
Ta-da!
I kind of feel like I did it for other people. And I don't really know how I feel about all that now. Like, in the midst of all the upheaval of, divorce again and medical stuff over the last few years, it's kind of just been, and like finding myself single for the first time, it's just kind of daunting to try to wrap my head around. Like, who am I? Just me, like, not me
Mm-hmm.
with someone.
Mm-hmm. That was quite the journey, Lisa.
Yeah, it was.
And what have you learned since coming out?
I think I've learned that life is really, really complicated. But I think that I've learned that possibly my acceptance of myself is more elusive than others' acceptance of me.
Hmm, that's big.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to kind of sort that out and internalize it. I still don't I still don't feel very comfortable about it all, honestly. Um, especially in the context of other people and what they think and all that. But by and large, people have been more supportive than not
Mm-hmm.
supportive. And like, I just assumed that, like, people from old church circles and stuff, that they just, like, hated me and thought I was terrible. But I have been surprised by their kindness in a lot of different instances. Yeah, I feel like I've learned, I need to give myself room to grow, and I need to give other people credit for being able to respond in a way that I don't necessarily expect.
Yeah, for sure. So I heard a couple different things. The first, that self-acceptance is hard, and the second, that outside acceptance is hard.
Yeah,
Is that an accurate summary?
yeah, it's all hard. That sounds about right.
It's all hard and it all has to do with acceptance.
I still find myself like when people refer to me as like a lesbian, like, I, even if
Mm,
it's like in a totally innocuous way, I still find myself going, ugh, like, it just, I don't know. Not that I'm like ashamed, but maybe I'm ashamed. I mean, not ashamed. I don't know how to describe it. Um, it just feels really conspicuous to me, and the last thing that I want to be on this earth is conspicuous.
mm,
Yes, I feel very conspicuous. I've never wanted to make waves or, create like dilemmas for people. Like, I don't want to be difficult to understand or accept or live with or come to terms with. Um, so yeah, this is, I don't know. It's kind of been a difficult thing for me because, like it or not, being queer does make waves. It does cause controversy. It does make people think about how they feel about things.
Mm-hmm. Yep. As soon as you're not part of the mass of quote unquote normal people, you suddenly have more eyeballs on you. As soon as you're pushed to the margins, it's easier to spot you on the margins than it is amongst all the other white pastors' wives.
Yeah, and I feel like it causes people to because so much of my background is in church circles and all of that stuff. I feel like a lot of people are like deconstructing and trying to figure out like how do I feel about the LGBTQ community in the context of church and all of that stuff. And it's like, I'm a part of that. Like, everybody that I knew that I used to know, I feel like when they think about me, or, if I ever even come to mind, that is something that they have to then contend with, like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, how do I feel about gay people? How does God feel about gay people? And, I don't necessarily want to be like the face of that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but I am, I guess,
Yeah.
in some instances. So,
Yeah, that was an interesting journey for me with the church that I was at when I came out in Austin because they weren't an affirming church. Um, they were quite liberal, but they still had fairly conservative views on, well, no, to be fair, um, a lot of the leadership was split on what they believed. So, me coming out in that church, I was the first, I think, like really active member to be involved in leadership and come out while being involved in leadership. And so I met with the pastors, I mean, to make sure that that they were like okay with me still being in leadership. And they were. But it started this domino effect of all of the pastors um, looking at what do they believe. And eventually, I mean, this took years. I wasn't even part of the church anymore by the time they became an affirming church. But
oh, yay.
it took years of pastors having meetings, leadership teams having meetings, eventually like the members having meetings. And I was in Berlin for some of this and for the last few years of this process for them. And they zoomed me in to one of their member meetings because I was kind of the face of the LGBT movement in the church. I did not try to start an LGBT movement in the church. In fact, there were people in the church before who before me who were affirming and who were having meetings. They were having meetings with LGBT folks and talking about how God loved them and how like affirming Bible study type things. Um but none of those people were in the LGBT community. They were all straight people, straight allies who were holding these groups. So I was like the first person as a member, and thus I became a little bit of a mascot. Um, I mean that diminishes that makes it sound like bad and trivial, and it was not that. But they wanted to know, what I thought and how I felt, and they wanted to know my story um, of how I got to where I got to, and sometimes it was exhausting, and sometimes it was really nice. because some people actually wanted to listen and hear, you know? Um, but yeah, it was interesting to like suddenly become the face of a of a movement. And after I came out, there were some other people in the church who came out very quickly afterwards. So I wasn't like the sole face of the movement, but I was the first.
Wow.
So I understand how you could feel the way that you feel.
Yeah, totally.
It's
It's
sort
a
of
good
like,
story. Got a good ending.
yeah, I mean, yeah, the whole I'm very proud of them for the work that they did to get to the place that they are. And now the pastor that they have is out and gay.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Were they there when you were there?
No. Mm-mm.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. I've talked about this in some previous episodes that I've recorded already, but it took a long time for me to feel pride, for me to feel proud of who I am. And like 10 years. Like now I can sit here and I can say I am proud of who I am. But 5 years ago, I remember having this conversation with my friend Chris, who is an out gay man and has been out for a very long time. And he said something like that it took him 5 years, more or less, to be comfortable and be proud about who he was. And he also came from an evangelical background. Also got married to a woman, also had 3 kids. You don't have 3 kids, but you get the point. And I remember sitting at the bar with him as he's telling me his journey. And I'm like, man, it's been 5 years. And I definitely still don't feel like proud of who I am and the sexuality piece. Um, I was making progress, but I hadn't reached like, okay, this is cool. I'm celebrating this. And now I can say at 10 years that I'm celebrating this. But it was definitely a process.
Yeah, I feel like I was more proud when I was with my wife.
Mm,
Like, I wasn't out there dangling out in the open by myself,
mm-hmm,
you know? It was like, it was a we, it wasn't just me.
mm-hmm,
So yeah, I feel like I maybe have like regressed some as far as, pride is concerned. And I certainly am not like, oh, it's bad. Gay people are bad. I'm bad. And, it's not anything like that. I don't know. It's just that feeling of like conspicuousness or like feeling like a spectacle or like I have something to be embarrassed of or something.
mm-hmm,
Yeah. So, well, I'm at the 5 year mark. Maybe it's going to start looking up.
mm-hmm. If your story is anything like my story, which it partly is, I have faith in your next 5 years.
Yeah. And I mean, I need to learn that in all areas, like I struggle with that with everything. So,
What do you wish people understood?
people that do have negative feelings or confusion, I want to understand that I wasn't lying to them. I was always trying to do and be what I thought was best. I want people to understand that things are a lot more complex than they seem,
Hmm.
and that people are people, and that I'm still me.
And if you could go back to your past self before coming out, what would you say?
I would say figure your shit out for yourself. not just always in the context of everyone else,
Mm.
in the context of a relationship or a church or a whatever. Figure out who you are and be you for you. So you can't really be there for anyone if you aren't there for yourself.
Yeah. I'm thinking back to when I came out and I was in a relationship at the time. I came out with my girlfriend. Um, and yeah, that was much easier than after it ended and I was still out and I was alone. And
Mm-hmm.
I am pretty sure I had some nights when I was like, what did I do this for? It didn't make my truth any less true, but it was like, oh my gosh. I wish I could. Do I wish I could go back and undo this? Yes and no. It just got harder, you know. It got more real, a different kind of real. I couldn't hide behind anybody and I couldn't count on anybody to support me through the hard things. But I was still out and I had to figure out what being out and single looked like.
Yeah, and like, I mean, now I'm single. I have a couple of kids, so when people meet me and I'm like talking about my kids, you know, they assume that I'm straight. And then, you know, if I talk about my ex, like which ex? Your ex-husband or your ex-wife? Like it's so weird, and it's just yeah, I feel like it's confusing for people because I'm not just like, I don't lead with, "Hey, I'm a lesbian."
This is something else that I've learned since coming out is that we do not come out just one time. It is continuous. Every time you meet a new person, not every time, but if you actually have any sort of friendship with a person, you come out at some point. Sometimes it happens randomly with strangers. Like it's just constantly like, hey, I'm not straight.
Yeah.
And that can be exhausting sometimes.
Yeah, I only wanted to come out once. I
Mm-hmm.
wanted that to be it, you know?
Yep. Straight people don't realize the privilege that they have with never having to come out. But once again, when you wind up on the margins of society, everything becomes a lot more visible. You have to keep explaining yourself or telling your story.
Yeah, it's not really my jam.
It's one
I
of the
don't,
hard
I
parts.
don't love that.
There's a lot of education that minorities have to do on a daily basis. And sometimes it's like intentional education of answering questions, and sometimes it's indirect.
Yeah, and I'm not gonna lie, like sometimes it's easier to just let people assume or think what they're gonna assume or think
Mm.
rather than correcting or being like, oh no, I'm actually gay, you know, like whatever. Think whatever you want. And I don't know if that's laziness or fear or shame.
I think it's a whole bunch of things. Has coming out helped you or influenced the way that you parent?
It does, like being out. I mean, there's a level of openness and honesty and acceptance, I think, I that just the fact that I am out kind of conveys to them. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I know that they could talk to me about anything, that they don't have to be afraid of, you know, what I'm going to think about them or whatever in any regard. I think, you know, it is, it immediately makes you an ally for anything.
Mm-hmm.
So,
That's cool.
yeah.
That sounds like a positive thing once you got past the hard part, the initial reaction part.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'm super proud of them. Like the ways that they have grown and the ways that they have, you know, allowed themselves to grow and, you know, think for themselves and make their own decisions about how they feel about things and about me and the world. Because, a lot of people just dig their heels in and they shut down instead of opening up. So,
Is there anything that you want to send the listeners off with?
E. Cummings, it takes courage to grow up and become who you really are.
That's so good.
Yeah, I've always found that one to be pretty inspirational.
It's so good. Well, thank you for joining us, Lisa. I have really enjoyed hearing parts of your story and reflections that I haven't before.
Thank you. It's good to be here. It wasn't nearly as scary as I had feared for the last 2 weeks.
Yes. You didn't even say yes 2 weeks ago.
Well, it feels like 2 weeks.
This is what anxiety does.
Mm-hmm.
And thank you to all the listeners who tuning in yet again for another queer story. I am so happy to be able to listen to all of these and share them with the world. So, until next time, what's the quote? What's the E coming quote? Takes courage to find out who you are.
To grow up and become who you really are.
So, until next time, keep courageous in your growth and figuring out who you are. Bye.
Bye.